Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Dan Tony Sports. My name is Dan Snyder, joined tonight by the usual suspects Dan O'Shea and Tony Casper. We got Dan Beebe, but tonight we have a special guest. You're not, it's not yet. You're not going to believe this, but we've scraped up another Tony. So now, we got a full house, Dan's and Tony's.
Tell me, yes.
For those of you gambling fans. Tony is from Superior Sports Talk Radio. I know him best from Death Wish Coffee, World's Strongest Coffee. Great company, great people, except for John Swedish, but now that I beat him, I guess he's a little bit better.
He's a little better.
He's a little bit better, yeah. Finally, someone beat him in fantasy, brought him down a peg. But we're going to start tonight the same way we always do with our poem. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Football. We're going to find out who is going to be the NBA MVP and why. But as Tony Casper gives me the death stare, let's get right into our poem, all right? This will be a weird week of football, well, at least for me. None of my teams are playing, not one of the three. Cowboys, Albany, and Penn State too. Without a team to root for, what will I do? Root against the Eagles, hope the Giants fail. Pray that the 49ers can kick some Redskin tail. Nope. Or maybe I'll be petty, crush Dan O'Shea's dreams. The Patriots are going to tear the Jets apart at the seams. Sorry, Mr. O'Shea. I know that attitude's I know that attitude blows. But the Giants just stole Darnold from under the Jets' nose. Ohio State and Michigan will probably win again. This week off will knock Penn State out of the top 10. Because that's the way the CFP selection committee rolls. They'll go undefeated and still the Rose Bowl. I know I might sound bitter, but what do you expect from me? I don't get to watch my teams, not a one of the three.
Solidly done.
But that's how the selection committee rolls. Penn State's not going to play, and they're going to get knocked out of the top 10. For whatever reason, they hate Penn State. They love Oklahoma. Oklahoma's going to be number one at the end of next week.
Paranoid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw Penn State get screwed last year, so I mean, can you really blame me? All right.
You're paranoid. No, man.
Yeah.
Michigan better be careful.
Speaking of paranoid, guys, I got this strangely cryptic message the other day. And I want to know if any of you can help me figure it out.
Encrypted?
Yeah. All it said was Sierra Hotel India Echo Lima Delta. Do you guys know what that means? Oh, yeah. That means the Shield is back together on Monday Night Raw.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose
I walked right into that.
back together.
I walked into it like I was intrigued
He was like,
until it happened. And I was like, oh, no.
Hounds of Justice.
I did not sign up for this podcast to talk wrestling.
The Hounds of Friggin' Justice back together, taking on the Miztourage.
Good.
Yeah. All right,
Louder.
that's going to be enough WWE for tonight.
Thank God. Okay. On to football.
But they run the yard. All right. So, college football, as we're watching a TV special about college football playoffs top 25, I have the AP top 25 in my hand. So let's read through this, and I have a couple questions. Number 1 is Alabama. Number 2 is Clemson. 3 Penn State. 4 Georgia. 5 Washington. 6 TCU. 7 Wisconsin. 8 Washington State. 9 Ohio State. 10 Auburn. 11 Miami. 12 Oklahoma. 13 USC. 14 Oklahoma State. 15 Virginia Tech. 16 Notre Dame. 17 Michigan. 18 South Florida. 19 San Diego State. 20 NC State. 21 Michigan State. A lot of states. 22 is Central Florida. 23 is Stanford. 24 is Texas Tech. And 25. The Midshipmen of Navy.
Whoa.
All right. So, first question that I'm going to ask.
Why is it only the midshipmen? Why not, the
Fuck everybody else.
Yeah, because we really
different tiers of shipmen.
we only care about the midshipmen. The upper shipmen, they're jerks. The lower shipmen, they're useless.
Yeah, they haven't heard that.
Yeah.
Shout out to our armed forces, you useless bunch of bastards.
I mean, are we treating them any worse than Trump is? I digress. First question is Clemson actually deserving of the number one spot? I want to hear what you guys think about that, because I believe that the way Alabama has played, they've demolished teams that they should, and they've played pretty badly against teams that they should play well against, i.e. they didn't do so great against Florida State. I thought they were going to kill them. And then they had a really tough game against Texas A&M just this past weekend. What do you guys think? Do you think Alabama should still be number one, or do you think Clemson should be number one?
Based on this year, I think it should be Clemson. I get it's Alabama; they're number one until they're not anymore. But they haven't had a very difficult schedule.
Whereas Clemson beat 3 top 15 teams in a row.
Exactly. Although, to be fair, Texas always does seem to have Alabama's number, so that was a lot better of a matchup than we were predicting. At least that I thought it was going to be. But I don't think they deserve it. I don't even know if they deserve the number 2 spot based on this year alone. I get their history and I get why people are still keeping them there, but if we're only looking at it from a year-to-year standpoint, I don't think they deserve to be number 1.
Absolutely not. For the reasons we just outlined, Alabama had a hard time with Texas A&M, who is way down from where they used to be. Mm-hmm. Let's not mince words. They don't have Ryan Tannehill. They don't have Johnny Football. Who's their quarterback? It's not Kenny Hill. He's at TCU.
It's not someone you're going to know off the top of your head. You're going to have to look it up unless you're a Texas fan.
Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Texas, they're about the same, but
yeah.
Texas A&M was quietly 4-1 coming into that game, though, right?
I mean,
it's not like they're a bad team. They had a tough game. Their one loss was UCLA, I believe.
Yeah, where they blew a 30-point lead.
Which is a tough one. And I'm, as a Clemson fan, I want to say Clemson should be number 1 because of the resume. But you then have to look at, was Louisville really as good as the polls had projected at the time when the game was played? Because now you see Louisville come out this past weekend and lose, and you start to question whether or not they should have been ranked in the top 10, 15 teams, and as they were. So, I mean, I get it. I think Alabama gets the number 1 spot, excuse me, just because it's SEC football as opposed to ACC football, and as much as the Big Ten has made its push to take over college football's conference, as the conference of choice for the NFL or what have you. The SEC is still the SEC. It's still the best conference in college football.
Does it deserve that name still, though? Because it seems to be Alabama and then other in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I definitely understand that thought.
But the way you look at it, the way
Georgia,
that they're portrayed at ESPN, everyone still pumps up the SEC like it is the well in which the NFL drinks from. Right. And it just seems to be that's always going to be the case. This, I think, is for the fact that this argument is even being had versus this Clemson, Alabama.
Let
is
you know
further proof. And with the games we saw, look at what happened with Oklahoma going down, with Michigan going down. This is further proof of reasons I think we could throw into the hat of why the playoff, one, is a success and why it needs to be expanded. Because no matter what the top 8 in there are, at any given day, there's nothing saying that number 8 team can't knock off that number 1.
Well, I mean, Ohio State is number 9. They lost to a top 5 team. Who's to say that Oklahoma is not better than Alabama?
Well, let's think about that for a second. Oklahoma just lost to an Iowa State team. An Iowa State team that was 2 points away from beating a decent Iowa team that we've seen this year. Yep. That was 7 seconds away from beating the number 3 team in the country in Penn State. So, when you think about the talent here, I hate to go to the cliche, but this is any given Saturday. Anyone can win here. It comes down to the perfect game, but I think that line between Alabama and Clemson is so thin that it almost doesn't exist. I mean, look at the votes, too, from the college. I mean, Clemson's receiving 18 votes for number 1. I mean, you're seeing a shift where a lot of AP people and coaches are starting to recognize Clemson's probably the better team in total. Will that carry over? Who knows? I mean, we've seen the number one teams go down on kickoffs. I mean, what was it, a couple years ago? Auburn knocked off Alabama on a kick return at the end of a game. I think that this is just furthermore reason, and given the fact that this conversation needs to happen just between 1 and 2, why we need to expand more.
And I don't want to get too far off topic, but I do believe the SEC still should have that moniker because, they have to get knocked off of that first. And I feel like Clemson did that with the national championship this past season, but at the same time, you have to continuously prove that. And Alabama every year reloads and comes back. And since they've taken over college football pretty much, the SEC has been considered the conference of, the conference to look to. So, I mean, I do believe that it's slipping away a little bit with the parity of, other conferences starting to come on. But the SEC itself still has, the Georgias and sure, Tennessee doesn't look great, but there's still a program that's getting these 5-star recruits that's stealing them from all these other teams.
They're going to get the history.
And
the history's on their side.
It's just like when Notre Dame, if Notre Dame goes, if they only have one loss, they're going to be a top 5 team almost every year just because of what happened 50 years ago.
Right.
Because they have the new.
And that's why Texas.
And
was
I don't
in
think
top
it's fair
25.
at all. That's why Texas actually gets all the love they still get, even though they suck this year.
They're terrible.
But you will look at games and teams, people will say, they got a great chance to win this game, or this is the game that turns.
Well,
Texas
that's what overrates
but
Tennessee half the time. They get that, but we know that they're not that team.
No, I think Tennessee is a different animal. Tennessee is like what Nebraska usually is. They start the season very strong, and they beat teams that they shouldn't, and then about week 7 or 8, right about this time, that's when you see teams like NC State beat them. That's when you see teams like South Carolina beat them.
I also think that we're seeing the growth of the other conferences as a result of the college football playoffs.
Except the Big 12.
That's because the Big 12 is poop.
They have a conference championship now.
I don't care. They don't have enough teams
they
for
don't
me
play,
to care.
They don't play defense.
Yes, that's another
not
good
even-
point.
Yeah.
They just
It's not
fling
even
the
a-
ball around.
That's
They're
the
playing
biggest.
7-on-7. That shit. It's not even football. Sorry. I'm sorry. It's not.
No, I mean,
That's a darn good point. I
We-
mean, they
we've said
they don't play
You're right.
defense.
There is no defense being played. It is shotgun, West Coast. You know what? They should change the rule for all Big 12 conference games. It's the first team to get to 100.
Yes.
I
Don't
would
even
watch
do
that.
a time. Just first team to 100. Go. Don't even keep a clock. Just
fantasy points. You can do if you can score on 80 yards, you get the catch for 1 point. You get the
we'll
touchdown
change
for
the
6.
entire scoring system for the Big 12 so that they can calculate a champion.
Yeah,
That
that'd
will inevitably get left out of the playoff.
that would be fun. All right. Anyone want to say anything more about Clemson should be number 1 or shouldn't be number 1 or yada yada yada?
I wouldn't be surprised if Clemson is number 1 by the end of the season. I really wouldn't. If Alabama slips and keeps playing, it almost seems like Alabama is playing overconfident. Like they don't feel like they can get beat.
Well,
I mean, I understand you put a whooping on Vanderbilt. Congratulations, but let's not bolster stuff too. Vanderbilt terrible.
do you remember the argument
Still
that?
Vanderbilt.
Do you remember the argument that we made at the beginning of the season about why Michigan isn't going to be as good as they usually are? Because they just lost too much.
Yeah.
Alabama lost a lot too.
They did, but I also expect Saban to reload and fire again. I expect it out of Urban Myers. I have to expect it out
So
of Saban.
doesn't that kind of point something at Jim Harbaugh and say maybe you're not the coach we've been told you are?
No, because he's finally now getting his recruits.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of
here's
A
the
and
thing. I
B.
mean, and Urban Meyer said it flat out. When you choose that school, you choose those kids. So they're your recruits when you go in. Those are your players. You can't turn around now and go, hey man, Spate sucks, but I'm stuck with him. Guess what, man? You had
Well,
4 other QBs on the roster you could have chose from too. That's the guy you went with.
He actually believes in Spate. Though.
That's the problem.
He believes in
That's
Spate.
even worse. Like,
Well, yeah, no, that's.
I mean,
pretty bad.
but at some point you have to say, okay, even if you lose 11 guys to the NFL,
They lost 17.
You have to be able to reload.
Yeah, but
I mean, Alabama every year loses a whole defense, and then the following year they're right back loaded, and you're going, oh, it's this guy and it's that guy. Every year it's the same thing with certain teams. You reload, And
I don't
that's
know.
with the coaching and the recruiting, and that's where being a head coach of one of those Power 5 conference teams and being considered like a top coach in the country